I'm here to talk about overlanding, from how-tos, advice, gear, vehicle builds, and everything in between. Oh hey there! Welcome to a new installment of Oh Hey There. Today we're going to be talking about border crossings with my good friend, you all know him, the one and only Kurt Williams, who has crossed many a border in his lifetime, and he is our border crossing expert on Expedition Overland. He helps us walk through everything, make sure we have all our T's crossed, I's dotted, that sort of thing. So Kurt, let's start out with, how many borders do you think you've crossed in your lifetime?
Probably around 100 international borders.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a few. A lot of those are trips down into Mexico, but we've done the Pan American kind of both directions from here to Ushuaia now.
Yeah. So
handful in Africa and a few others.
And then you do the Baja 1000. You've done that for what, the last 5 years or so?
Yeah, raced it the last 5, but we've been going down there the last 7 or 8, so a lot of border crossings with that as well.
Yeah. Cool. So you've got some credibility. You've done this before. So can you walk us through kind of like what's your mindset and what are the steps you take when you know I'm going to be crossing one border or multiple borders in a trip? How do you prepare for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we learned a lot along the way too, and I still learn every time I cross a border. But the big thing was just being prepared with all our paperwork. And we had these really awesome binders that covered all of the vehicles. So you've got to remember you're doing 2 things when you go through each border. Not only are you importing a vehicle in most cases, but you're also getting people through. So you're doing immigration as well as customs and getting an import for the vehicle.
Right.
So having all that paperwork in line is big because it's going to streamline the process. And it also shows them when you're going through that, hey, these guys know what they're doing. They've got all the correct paperwork.
In here, we've got copies of everyone's passports, right?
Right.
Everyone in our group, because who knows if some guy loses his passport. Never done that
for
before.
A minute or two.
Just for camera time.
Yeah.
So we got that. We got our registration. We got our titles. We've got copies of immunizations in here. And all of this stuff, it's not necessarily going to get you out of an issue in the moment, but it at least leads to a solution, right?
Right.
So you can't, necessarily pull a document and it's obviously a photocopy, but it can help you get to the spot where you're going to get to a solution. There's one border we had, I think is going into Belize, and they wanted a list, right, of everything in the vehicle. Is that something you commonly do, or is that like a
No, that was
play by ear?
That was a little interesting scenario. I remember that one. I think he kind of saw a lot of the camera gear, just a lot of personal gear. We had a lot of camping gear. We were staying and traveling for several months on that trip, and he wanted us to name all of those items and put a value next to them. And what they wanted to know is that when you leave the border at the next one, that you don't leave with more stuff, because ultimately they want you to pay tax for anything you bring in or out. That is a scenario that we've encountered a couple times, but that's rare. Most of the time it's just going to be stating why you're there as a tourist or what you're working on, and then naming all the vehicles, all the drivers of those vehicles. It's an important process, as well as who owns the vehicle. So having the paperwork to match.
Sure. What's the shortest you've been at a border and the longest you've been at a border?
Well, we had some that were probably 30 minutes long. I mean, they were just on it and they had lines and nice queues. And then we've had some that were, I had a personal one going in between, going into Peru that was an 8-hour border. And we really thought, like, are we ever going to get through this? This could be bad. Yeah. That was coming north through South America. And the problem there was just paperwork with names on the paperwork. The driver of the vehicle needs to be also not only the registered owner of the vehicle on the title, but the registration for the license plate as well. And sometimes that doesn't work because some states it's registered to a company, or it's registered to a group, or registered to several people, or maybe you're borrowing a friend's vehicle.
Right.
That's an issue, and you need to make sure you have all the paperwork in line, a letter of attorney to be driving that, because that can hang you up.
Man, sometimes it just turns out super easy. Sometimes you're there for a while. But either way, I think it's important to remember, like, those people, they're just doing their jobs. Right.
Yeah.
They're not trying to make life difficult. They're just doing what they're supposed to do. One thing that's kind of weird, fumigation.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. What's actually happening there? What do you think is happening?
Right. Well, there's only a few countries I've experienced that do that, and there's a few different ways we've had it done. When you go through Baja, the north into Baja Sur, the southern state of Baja, you go through a checkpoint, a quarantine checkpoint, and in that case, they actually have you drive through like a little bit of mister that kind of sprays stuff.
Right.
And what they're looking to is quarantine plant and animal viruses and bacteria and things that could, affect their ecosystems down there and their livestock.
Yep.
There's one in Central America, I believe it was going into Nicaragua, where they opened up the doors of the vehicles and they sprayed it with this fog.
Yeah.
And then they shut the doors for a minute and they opened the doors and the fog kind of rolled out. So that's a part of the process, and you just have to smile and nod and say, here we go.
Yeah, you just accept it. You don't get around it. Don't try to get around it.
Don't try, don't try.
And that's, same, bringing vehicles back into the U.S., right? We had to make sure that they were clean.
Right.
And the same issues, you didn't want to bring that biomatter back. So we get to a border, we check the vehicles and check ourselves in, get to the other side. A lot of times insurance is involved.
Right.
So what happens in that step?
Well, so it's important to know which countries you're traveling to and what their insurance requirements are. Not every country requires that we carry insurance. And of course, it's never a bad idea to try and have insurance that covers you in those countries. And be very, very, very careful to know whether your US or your home country insurance covers where you're traveling. So you can go online either ahead of time, or in many cases, we were able to buy that at the border. So part of the border crossing would be a little row of insurance companies right there that would sell it on the spot. They would issue you a form and print it. And very few times did we ever get asked for those, maybe 1 or 2 borders in our recent South America expedition. But if you didn't have it that one time, every dollar it cost you to get it would have gone out the window and probably delayed the trip and maybe got you in a lot of legal trouble, let alone if, heaven forbid, there were an accident.
Yeah, who knows what would happen then. That could have been bad news. So guys, I want to make the point that borders should not be intimidating. They're kind of fun. They're part of the travel.
Right.
It's part of the experience, right? And we've talked about before, like, you can go from roughly Salt Lake to Prudhoe Bay is about the same distance as Salt Lake to Panama, right?
Yeah, by the miles, it's not too far off.
Yeah.
Depending on the route you take, but a lot of border crossings in between the Salt Lake to Panama, but yeah, they shouldn't intimidate you.
Yeah, hopefully that helps, guys. I just want you to feel free to go explore, go see the world. If you have any questions, send us questions in the comments below. Myself or Kurt will answer those as best as we can.
You bet.
And get out there and start traveling. I'll see you next time.